The 18th of March, 1935, 9:41 p.m., the back room of the Hotel Theresa, Harlem. The pen is already uncapped. Joe Louis is holding it like it weighs more than his right hand ever did in the ring. The table is too small, the room too hot. Cigarette smoke crawls along the ceiling like it's alive, like it's listening. Three men sit across from him. In the middle is Frankie Carbo, the mob's Czar of Boxing, jackets still buttoned, hats resting on their knees like polite threats. One of them slides the contract closer with two fingers, slow, gentle, the way you move something sharp toward a child. "Just sign right there, Joe," the man says. His voice is soft, practiced, bottom line. "You'll never have to worry about money again." Joe looks down, pages and pages, words packed, tight, no air between them. Percentages, rights, management clauses he doesn't understand, but feels in his gut. His name is printed clean at the top, already owned before the ink even hits. The man smiles. Everybody signs. This is how champions are made. Joe swallows. His mouth is dry. Somewhere outside, a car backfires. He flinches. Another man leans in, smelling like gin and peppermint. "You want to fight, don't you, kid? This is the road. There ain't another one." Joe nods once. Not because he agrees, because he's tired of being cornered. The pen tip hovers. But to understand why that pen hovering over the paper felt like a gun pointed at his head, you have to understand how the boxing business worked in those days. You didn't climb into the ring just to fight another man. You fought contracts, too. You fought smiles that promised wealth and papers that delivered silence. Young black fighters came in strong and left empty, their names still famous while their pockets stayed light. Joe Louis had watched it happen. He'd seen men who once shook arenas now shaking hands on street corners, begging for favors from the same men who once called them champions. If Joe signed that paper, he wasn't becoming a king. He was becoming a servant. Back in the room, the pen is still hovering. Then the door opens. No knock. Just the slow creak of wood that hasn't been oiled because nobody expected trouble. The room changes temperature. A tall man steps inside, coat still on, hat low. He doesn't say excuse me. He doesn't apologize. He just closes the door behind him, like he plans on staying a while. One of the men at the table frowns. This is a private meeting. The man by the door doesn't answer. He walks forward, shoes quiet on the rug, eyes scanning the room. He stops behind Joe Louis, close enough that Joe can smell bay rum and steel. Joe doesn't turn around, he already knows. Bumpy Johnson reaches into his coat and takes out a straight razor, old worn. He snaps it open with a soft metallic click that cuts through the smoke. Every eye in the room locks onto it. Bumpy sets the razor down on the table, right next to the contract, doesn't threaten anyone with it, doesn't point it, just lays it flat, blade catching the light. Then he speaks. "Evenin', gentlemen." Nobody answers. Bumpy looks at the contract, then at the pen in Joe's hand. "That thing heavy?" Joe hesitates. "Yes, sir." One of the suits clears his throat. "Who the hell are you?" Bumpy finally looks at him, slow, measured. "I'm a man who reads." The man scoffs. "This doesn't concern you." Bumpy smiles a little, not friendly, more like he just heard something stupid. "Everything in this room concerns me." He picks up the contract with two fingers, careful not to smudge anything, flips through pages like he's done this before, like he's seen men cry over these words after the cheers fade. "You boys sure like small print," Bumpy says. "Funny thing about small print, it's where the knife usually is." One of the men stands up halfway. "Put that down." Bumpy doesn't even glance at him. He stops on a page, taps a line with the tip of the razor. Not cutting, just pointing. "Lifetime management rights." Bumpy reads aloud. That's a long time for a young man. The first man smiles again, tighter now. Standard language. Bumpy nods. "So is theft." Joe finally turns his head, looks up at Bumpy. Mr. Johnson, I don't got much time. Bumpy meets his eyes. Calm, steady. You got all the time you need. You just don't know it yet. One of the suits laughs, sharp and nervous. This is ridiculous. Kid, you want to end up like the rest of them, broke and forgotten? Bumpy's hand moves, fast. The razor slices clean through the edge of the contract, just the corner. A neat cut. Paper flutters to the table. Nobody breathes. Bumpy looks up. Don't rush him. The man who laughed sits back down slowly. Joe stares at the cut page. His heart is pounding so loud he's sure they can hear it. Bumpy leans closer, voice low now. Just for Joe. They tell you about the champions before you. Joe shakes his head. They tell you how they drove Cadillacs one year and rode buses the next. How their hands got old, but their contracts stayed young. Joe swallows. They said I'd be different. Bumpy smiles again. They always do. He straightens up, looks at the table. Gentlemen, you came to Harlem to buy a man. The first suit stiffens. Watch your mouth. Bumpy picks up the razor again. This time he flips it closed, snaps it shut. That's my mouth watching yours, he says quietly. Silent stretches, thick, dangerous. Joe looks down at the pen again, then back at the men, then at Bumpy. If I don't sign, Joe says, voice barely steady, what happens? One of the suits answers quick, too quick. You don't fight. Bumpy cuts in. You fight, just not for them. The man slams his hand on the table. You think you can stop this? Bumpy leans forward, hands on the table now, razor between them like a line drawn in blood. No one spilled yet. I already did. Joe's hand loosens. The pen rolls a few inches away. No one moves to grab it. The clock on the wall ticks loud as a gunshot. Bumpy looks down at Joe, voice calm, almost kind. This is the moment, champ. You sign your name or you keep it. Joe, Louis stares at the blank line. The room waits. The clock keeps ticking, each second stretching longer than the last, and nobody dares reach for the pen. Joe's fingers are still curled like they expect something to be there, like they're not ready to accept the space where his name was about to live forever. One of the men clears his throat again, but this time it sounds weak. You're making a mistake listening to him. Bumpy doesn't look up. That's funny. I was thinking the same thing about you. But to understand why that pen rolling away felt like a gun hitting the floor, you have to understand how the boxing business worked in those days. You didn't climb into the ring just to fight another man. You fought contracts, too. You fought smiles that promised wealth and papers that delivered silence. Young black fighters came in strong and left empty, their names still famous while their pockets stayed light. Joe Louis had watched it happen. He'd seen men who once shook arenas now shaking hands on street corners, begging for favors from the same men who once called them champions. The man on the far left leans forward, voice dropping, trying a different angle. Joe, kid, nobody's robbing you. This is protection. We handle the business so you can do what you do best. Joe opens his mouth and closes it. He looks at Bumpy instead. Bumpy nods once. Ask him who owns your name after you sign. The man bristles. That's not relevant. Bumpy turns the contract around, slides it back across the table, taps the page again. Read it out loud. The part you don't want him to hear. The room shifts. The men exchange glances. One of them laughs, but it doesn't land. We're not here for theatrics. Bumpy smiles thin. Number, you're here for ownership. Joe finally speaks, voice low but steady. Who gets my money? The first man answers fast. You do. We just take our cut. Bumpy tilts his head. How much? The man hesitates, just a breath too long. Standard. Bumpy chuckles. Funny word. Means whatever the man with the pen says it means. He turns to Joe. They take your purse, your endorsements, your exhibition fights. They take your losses and forgive themselves. And when your hands slow down, they keep your name working long after your body quits. Joe's jaw tightens. That true? The man snaps. He's exaggerating. Bumpy shrugs. Then it should be easy to strike it out. Silence again. One of the men finally stands fully now. You're oversteppin'. This ain't your fighter. Bumpy looks up at him, slow, calm. Every black man in this neighborhood is my concern. The man sneers. You some kind of savior now. Bumpy's eyes harden. Number, I'm just tired of watching wolves teach lambs how to sign. The man reaches into his jacket just enough to be noticed. The razor opens again. Clean. Sharp. Final. Bumpy doesn't move from his spot. That hand keeps going, and I'll show you how contracts used to be signed. The hand freezes. Joe's heart is pounding, but something else is rising with it. Something heavier than fear. He looks at the men across from him. Really looks, and for the first time he sees past the smiles. Why Harlem? Joe asks suddenly. They blink. What? You could have had me sign anywhere. Why here? Bumpy answers before they can. Because you thought he'd feel small in a big room. The men don't deny it. Bumpy leans closer to Joe. They wanted you nervous, wanted you grateful. Joe nods slowly. I was. The man at the table slams his palm down again. Anger spilling now. You walk away from this, kid. You walk alone. Bumpy shakes his head. He won't. Joe looks at Bumpy. You promise? Bumpy meets his eyes. I don't promise, I guarantee. The razor comes down, not on skin, but on paper. This time it cuts deeper, right through a clause. A clean line through ownership. The men jump to their feet. That contract is dead, Bumpy says calmly. You can leave with it in pieces or leave without it at all. Joe pushes his chair back and stands. The room feels smaller now, but he feels bigger inside it. One of the men spits. You'll regret this. Bumpy folds the razor and slips it back into his coat. So will you. Joe steps away from the table. The pen stays where it fell. As they head for the door, Bumpy pauses, looks back at the men one last time. Next time you come huntin' in Harlem, he says softly, bring a bigger knife. The door opens, and Joe Louis walks out without signing his life away. The hallway outside feels colder, quieter, like the building itself is holding its breath. Joe's footsteps sound too loud to him, every step echoing with what almost happened back there. He doesn't speak right away, neither does Bumpy. They walk side by side, coats brushing, the smell of smoke still clinging to them like a warning. Joe finally breaks it. They gonna come back? Bumpy nods once. Of course they are. Joe stops walking, turns to him. Then why'd you do it? Bumpy stops too, looks at Joe the way a man looks at a mirror he doesn't use anymore, because I've buried too many champions who were alive when the dirt hit 'em. Joe frowns. I ain't dead. Bumpy smiles. Not tonight. They reach the front of the hotel outside. Harlem hums, music leaking from clubs, laughter spilling onto sidewalks, life moving fast because nobody knows how long it gets to stay that way. Joe hesitates at the door like he's waiting for someone to tell him where to go next. I don't got a manager, Joe says. I don't got a deal. Bumpy opens the door for him. What you got is time. That's rarer. They step into the night. A couple of men across the street watch them. Eyes sharp, hands buried in coats. Joe notices, his shoulders tense. Bumpy notices, Joe noticing. Relax, Bumpy says. If they wanted blood, you wouldn't hear your own feet. Joe exhales slowly. You always carry that razor. Bumpy chuckles. Only when I'm expectin' liars. They walk a few steps in silence. Joe finally asks the question that's been clawing at him since the table. What you want from me? Bumpy stops again. Turns fully this time. You think everybody wants something. Joe doesn't answer. Bumpy steps closer, voice low, steady. I want you to fight free. That's it. I want you to win and still recognize yourself in the mirror 10 years from now. Joe studies his face. You ain't my family. Bumpy nods. Number, but I know what happens when family don't protect their own. A car rolls past slow, too slow. The engine idles nearby. One of the men from the meeting steps out of the shadows, alone. No smile now, no Polish, just anger and nerves. This ain't over, he says. Bumpy doesn't turn around. Never is. The man looks at Joe. You just made powerful enemies. Joe straightens his back. I've been fightin' powerful men my whole life. The man sneers. In the ring. Not out here. Bumpy finally turns. Out here, he says calmly, is my ring. The man's jaw tightens. He glances around, weighing something. Pride against survival. He chooses survival. This city's gonna eat you, he tells Joe. Then he backs away, melts into the night. Joe watches him go. His hands are shaking now, not from fear, something else. Adrenaline, freedom, responsibility. I didn't know, Joe says quietly, about the contracts, about any of it. Bumpy nods. That's how traps work. Joe looks up at the lights, the streets, the people. So what happens now? Bumpy steps back, creating space between them. Now you build your own table, and you make sure the pen belongs to you. Joe hesitates. You gonna be there, Bumpy smiles, just a little. You won't always see me, but they will. Joe laughs once, short and disbelieving. You scare 'em. Bumpy's smile fades. Good. They start walking again. Slower now. Joe feels the weight of what he avoided settling into him. The years he didn't lose. The money he didn't bleed away. The voice he kept. You ever think about boxing, Joe asks. Bumpy laughs. Real this time. Not too many rules, too many refs. They reach the corner. This is where they part. Joe stops, turns. I won't forget this. Bumpy adjusts his coat. Don't remember me, remember the lesson. Joe nods. What lesson? Bumpy meets his eyes one last time. Anybody Rushine. You to sign your name don't deserve it. Joe extends his hand. Bumpy looks at it for a second, then shakes it. Firm, honest. Joe walks off into the Harlem night, shoulders squared, future unwritten. Bumpy watches him go until he disappears into the crowd. Then he turns the other way, disappearing just as easily. Back in the hotel, the torn contract still sits on the table, bloodless but dead. A warning to the next man who thinks paper is stronger than steel. And somewhere down the line, when Joe Louis becomes a name, the whole world knows. The men who tried to own him will remember one night in Harlem when a razor touched paper and changed everything. They never talked about that night in public. No headlines, no court paper, just a contract that never got signed and a champion who stayed his own man. In Harlem, they remembered it different. They said Joe Louis learned how to fight outside the ring that night. And they said Bumpy Johnson never raised his voice because he never had to. Some men swing fists. Some men swing blades. And some men just know exactly where to place them.